discussions on the challenges and the opportunities in wind energy supply chain amidst the global reset. And herein from the panelists, we invite their views and their recommendations towards deepening skills, empowering SMEs, empowering MSMEs to actively invest and participate in the growth of the wind sector. The panel is also going to be debating on how to attract more manufacturing investment, compete against the LCC, and deliver a higher share of manufacturing in India's growing GDP. Our moderator of the session, Mr. Vivek Srivastava, the CEO, India Business, Suzlon Energy. Our panelist, Mr. K. Bharati, CEO, Windar Renewables. Mr. Prasant Vittal, the Chief Operating Officer of Senvion. We have Mr. Bhaskar Radhakrishnan, the Managing Director of Better India, providing global wind energy industry, onshore and offshore turbine component design, casting, machinery, and surface treatment assembly offering. We have Ms. Corinne Holloway, the Global Strategic Marketing Leader, Onshore Wind, GE Vernova, Energy Equipment Manufacturing and Services Company. Our next eminent panelist, Mr. Pandu Chilakuru, the whole-time Director of Flender, one of the world's leading manufacturers in wind turbine industry, and Mr. Dinesh Lakshmanan, Head Supply Chain, Envision Energy India. A big panel we have. We have Mr. Madhava Krishna Pokala, Vice President and Head of the Global Manufacturing External Factories, Vestas, India.
Good afternoon, everyone. It's indeed a privilege for me to be having a ringside view and hosting this chat and conversation on a very, very important and topical session. While we are dreaming today, and not just dreaming, actually wanting to make it happen and doing everything to make happen from 3 to 5 to 10, the role of supply chain, both for manufacturers and suppliers, is the most critical one. So without taking much of time on introductions, which have almost happened, and actually people on the dais don't need much of introduction, we have a very interesting gamut of panelists today. We have 4 people who are from OEMs, and Corinne from GE Vernova, Dinesh from Envision, Madhav from Vestas, and Prashant from Senvion. We have across a segment of supply chain, which is the entire gearbox, electrical, etc., Pandu, the ever vibrant and vocal person. It's good to have him here. Bharti from Windar, the tower and the mechanical, which goes in, as we call in OSBL and ISBL in hydrocarbon language. Bhaskar, again. And so these are people who represent the entire value chain. And today, while we are doing this session, the context of this should be very clear to all of us. We are not just talking about make in India for India. We are also looking at the opportunity that exists for India today to become not from just where we are, but even a bigger major player in the global supply chain. That's part one. Part two, we are talking now increasingly about enhancing capacities, capabilities, and competencies, and making it cost competitive. Third and most critical, India is dreaming big on offshore. And there, the challenges on supply chain are going to be even higher. So let me now get the panelists involved into this. What we are going to do is, I have segmented the entire session into 4 parts. The first is on opportunities, and just giving a context so that the audience is well aware of it. India's growing role in wind energy and the push for localization in the renewable energy sector. While solar has made stride, wind remains pretty under-leveraged. The key data points that we can all look at is domestic manufacturing capacity is 17.25 gigawatt, but we still import critical components like balsa wood, carbon fiber, non-standard steel plates. The import dependency on forging and castings, tower flanges, and specialized steel due to disruptions and inconsistent local demand are well known. For example, the CRGO issue. China's dominance in wind equipment exports, at 61% of global capacity, while India holds about 32%. This is a good opportunity for China plus one. The current lead times for imported material are anywhere between 3 to 5 months for critical items like balsa, carbon fiber, etc. The Indian government has allocated 3.2 billion or 24,000 crore rupees under the PLI scheme to enhance domestic manufacturing of solar cells and modules. In the USA, an incentive program on local content requirement has been launched through the IRA, Inflation Reduction Act, and we'll talk about how successful it is. We also look at automobile, where aggregation of vendors, development, and incentives has completely turned around the sector. We also look at the behavior of the steel players, and also, Corinne being here, why globally Indian OEMs are best partners in terms of safety, quality, trade agreements, and reliability. So my question to the panel, and the first one is, what steps can India take to reduce its import dependency for wind turbine components and become a global supply chain hub for wind energy? What I'll request is that let's take the question for the steel. Let's take the question for that you can address. Let's take the question for forgings and castings separately, and Pandu, for you, the entire generator gearbox components.
Since you said components from blend of energy, we are supplying mechanical components as well as electrical components. We are there with the gearbox and generator as well. Let me look at, take the mechanical part of the question first. The single biggest challenge, the first one which comes on my list of challenges is steel. And steel today is not while steel is being seen as a commodity, and the kind of steel what we need is a specialty steel. And the specialty steel, the quantum or the volume which we are looking at is really not attractive, lucrative to the steel makers in India. Whenever I talk to a steel maker, the first question is how many million tons you want. But certainly I'm not in a position to quote give them MOQ in million tons, not even 1,000 tons. That's the challenge we have. Moving to the electrical side of the equation, again, let me take generator as the right example there. Again, the problem boils down to steel. It's now called e-steel. Again, e-steel, though we have, few suppliers in India, again, the gap between players elsewhere, our neighboring countries are offering at least 40% cheaper. Then what incentivizes me to buy it from locally is a big question. Here, on one side, the volumes, the ticket size is a challenge. Really, it's really causing a concern, viability to the steel makers. On the other side, price, the structural market-related issues is another challenge. This is where I request, the forum to put our efforts towards the government, and at least now that the viability gap funding has been offered to the offshore there, at least an amount of viability gap funding, can that be allocated towards this, specialty steels within towards the India is just a thought which we need to mull over and then take a strong recommendation towards the Ministry of Steel.
Yes, please. Good afternoon. We make steel tubular towers from north to south, if you look at it, there are many tower manufacturers. Collectively, we can make around 15 gigawatt of towers required in India. It's a well-established segment for OEM support. And if you look at the main component of the tower, as you all know, but I just want to quickly brief it, the steel plates is a special grade steel plates. There are 3 prominent mills in India from where we normally source since so many years. And, but still, due to some reasons, like capacity or sometime even the cost, we will be forced to import steel plate from Korea. But internals, as far as the internals is concerned, like ladder, platform, everything, the lift, all that, it's all 100% indigenized. We have developed several suppliers and they are well approved by almost all OEMs. The third component, important component, is the flange. It's a forged flange which comes in all sections. But then if you look at it, as you know, the tower sizes have increased due to the efficiency requirements. The flange size also has increased. It has increased more than 5 meter. More than 5 meter, if it goes, I cannot source it from India. I will have to necessarily import it from elsewhere, because we do not have the mill, a forging mill, which can forge more than 5 meter. So as he said, they asked for continuous business and they asked for commitment. They asked for 5-year signing of the agreement to invest more. So that is the challenge that we are facing for onshore steel tubular towers. Otherwise, we are well settled. All tower manufacturers are well settled to get it done locally.
Thank you. Bhaskar, one of the most well-known challenges is in forgings, castings. And you being so involved in that, what's your thought on that?
Yeah. I am from Better. We are one of the world's largest producers of castings for wind turbines. Of course, we started our production in 2022 April, and 2 of our existing customers are here, and potentially we have a few more customers sitting along with me here. So, of course, first I would like to talk about opportunities. Currently, we export 75% of our components to US. So there is a huge potential for us to be a global export hub, especially in terms of castings, large castings for wind turbines. So what should we do to make it happen? First, of course, we talk about China plus one policy, and in China, the pig iron price is very low, and then they get, say, around 38 rupees per kilogram, and we get 50. So what we do, our finance head is also here. We have a facility in China. What we do is we make a cost comparison between both the facilities and then try to match them. Of course, labor cost is cheap here, and we continuously try to innovate, optimize, improve our productivity, and so on to meet the Chinese price. The challenges, of course, as mentioned by Mr. Pandu, getting good quality iron, pig iron is also a challenge, and we are working with our suppliers to make it happen. So at one point of time, we would like to have 100% pig iron from India.
Wonderful. So let me take the round to the OEMs, and the question that vexes you most is, how can India replicate the success seen in the solar industry in localization, and what role can government incentives play, be it export subsidies, duty revisions, or harmonized standards? What are the most critical supply chain areas that need focus to reduce variability and risk in wind energy projects? And something on the ticket size that you have felt and learnt in your journey about what is it, the threshold for localization. But before that, let me bring in Corinne on the most talked about subject, which is the IRA to boost the local content requirements. And I'm sure the audience is very inquisitive about what's going well, what is it that we can learn, and what is it that we can avoid.
Thank you. I'll just start by saying, being in country, we see, I say, the good, the bad, and the ugly of IRA. The overwhelming majority is good. So I'll talk about the parts of the IRA that are directly related to the growth of the wind sector and specifically supply chain. And then I'll talk a little bit about my perspective on where we could have done a better job in the IRA and what we missed, and perhaps what India can learn from that perspective. So starting, when you think about the overall goal is installing more megawatts, but also operating more kilowatt hours. Starting with the developers, there's a production tax credit or a capital tax credit for a wind project, such that for the production tax credit, you get it per kilowatt hour generated. So it's probably the most important part of the tax law, but there's a 10% bonus on that if you use domestic content. And surprisingly, or maybe not surprisingly for the India team, 10% on a project can make or break it. So this extra 10% is based upon not 100% domestic content, but local steel and then a certain percentage of main component local content that ramps up over time, enabling the supply chain to build with it. But I think that's an important piece for India, because one of the reasons we from India can export to the US is because it's not a 100% requirement. So first is for the developers, literally making more money on what they generate. Second, and new to the US for wind, is the advanced manufacturing credit. So for every blade, tower, and nacelle that are built in the US with certain stipulations, there's a financial incentive from a tax perspective. And then lastly, money talks, right? So one of the challenges is some of the entities don't have enough tax appetite. So there's a structure whereby you can monetize the tax credit. So just get the money to the manufacturers more easily. That has actually driven, not just in wind, but across all of the portfolio in IRA, 300% increase in investment in the last 2 years, and I think we're reaching close to $100 billion of new investment across the industry. So I think that's super important. Where I'll say maybe India could learn from what we missed is, at the end of the day, the manufacturing, the developers are there, but we still can't get as many projects across the line with interconnect, permitting, right-of-way to actually use all that manufacturing. And I hear a lot this week about, talking to our customers, the challenge of those same topics. So it may seem peripheral to this topic, but if you can't get projects across the line, you can't supply them.
Thank you, Corinne. That's a very comprehensive view around development, supply chain, manufacturing, and getting it across the line, and how we need to look at it in an integrated way. Let me get across to Madhav for his thoughts on what do you think are the most critical areas in the supply chain that need addressing?
Yeah, very interesting discussions that's happening here, from the steel to IRA, right? It's quite interesting to watch how the wind industry is getting evolved over a period of time, right? So when you look at India, it's more than 40, 50 years that we are in this journey, and the supply chain has increased drastically as we speak, right? And at least this last decade, it has been accelerating, I would say, because of the will, power, and the clarity in which the things are happening around. So we are doing good in the wind now. Post-pandemic, we were a 1 gigawatt, and now we have grown to 3 gigawatt. Then there is a lot of fresh air to breathe, and there is confidence with the supply chain, because the LCOE is the pressure and the challenge that puts to entire supply chain. and that is improving now through the volumes. And this volumes is going to really help us to grow in the supply chain. And when you look at the incentives that is being given, we need to have the government support to help us to get furthermore. 3 gigs per year is not enough. We need to accelerate. Government has put very ambitious target on 10 gigs per year, but as a supply chain that is going to cater to the OEMs, that should make sure the government, the suppliers work together to ensure they get a point where we become competitive in terms of the volume, in terms of these innovations, and the technology as well, where each supplier has to make sure that they get this fully anchored into their organization to get the right technology to the country and also make cost competitive. And if you want to really export this, right, so what happens across the globe is the energy policy is no more energy policy, it has become a security policy. So people are trying to make sure that the components are produced in those countries, and that's why IRAs and all these European Green Deals and China's 5-year plan, all these are coming up because there should be a security towards the energy that is produced. And also the cyber is also increasing drastically as we speak, as we talk about. So keeping this in view, there should be a balance, and the globe is resetting in terms of the supply chain. There should be clearly a balance how to reset this. And we need to ensure the governments are much matured, and they should show the leadership and create a trade agreements. So we create a more sustainable supply chain. That's what I would say. And also tell the government that this industry should not be seen as a cost-based. It is a value-based. End of the day, it creates value to every one of our life it touches. So this is where the government should really accelerate, get a lot of the incentives towards this, and ensure that this industry flourishes. Globally, when you look at this, the countries, there is even certain amount of, maybe less amount of subsidies being given to the fossil fuels, right? And now we are in a stage where we are going to tip that definitely compared to the fossils what we spend here. So green is the way going forward, and it is almost in the tipping point where we will need to harness this values and harness this industry into the country.
Thank you. Let me get Dinesh in. Dinesh, I'm sure in your drive to localize a lot of components, what are the key challenges that you see Indian manufacturers face in terms of investment, thresholds, certainty of business, etc.? A quick take on that from your side.
Yeah. So I'm Dinesh. I represent Envision Energy. So I take care of supply chain. Now, if we look into the wind business for last 30, 40 years, what Madhav was talking about, there has been an evolution. Earlier, India was more focused on export and also local. Now we are more focused on local and also export. So there is a slight change of the business model which has happened in India. Now, if you look into major elements like what Pandu mentioned about or all others mentioned, the cost is a factor. When you talk about a supply chain, cost, quality, and delivery, these are 3 things what we look into it. So we need to be cost competitive. Now, yes, one is the material side. Otherwise, other areas also we need to work on. Might be talks about the productivity improvement, talks about automation. If it talks an example of a blade plant today, even without a 500 to 1,000 employee workers, you cannot manufacture a blade. It is totally manual. So there's a cost pressure to an OEM to supply as per the customer requirement because it has become a very cost competitive product in India. The second part is on the robust supply chain. the commodity prices varies day in, day out. There is no control on a commodity. Now, when we sign up an agreement with a customer, the delivery could happen a year later, but we don't know what's going to happen after a year. But we take a risk and do that. And finally, it falls on a supply chain to make sure that you get the right price for the customer. So that is the second part. Third is on the competitiveness. I think we also need to improve a lot of competitiveness for the manpower availability in the market. And finally, all of us know that logistics is the biggest challenge what we face. And how do we face the logistics challenge? Because we really pushing into the market for last 2 years. Already the product sizing is changed. Earlier, currently we are talking about 3+, now we all are talking about 5+. Now the size is changing, the requirement are changing, the expectation is changing, so everything changes. So how are we prepared for that? So these are the areas where we continuously see challenges in the supply chain.
Thank you. Prashant, you are in a very unique position as an Indian OEM. Let me get your thoughts on something which is bothering all of us. If you see the GVEC report, it talks about more than 50% of the developers are citing logistics as a critical barrier to project viability. Okay. And if you currently look at what's happening in terms of wind turbine blades, the sizes are going up from 60 to 80 meters plus. They are complicating transport logistics, requiring specialized vehicles and routes. The other thing that's becoming critical is this obsession with larger turbine sizes. While the country just stabilized at 2 to 3 to 4 to 5, this game that's happening. What are the key challenges that you are seeing in this sudden ramp up that's happening along with the logistics issues? And how do you manage such sudden transitions when you talk about models shifting, not even having a baseline life of 2 to 3 years and at least 5 gigawatts supplied?
Yeah, thank you. I think the major challenge on the logistics, what we are seeing right now is the infrastructure, what is getting developed is really not as fast as the turbine is changing, because every 2 years now we see, 2 megawatts became an obsolete, it's 3, now we see that's becoming obsolete, we are going to 4, 5. So with this kind of rapid change happening on the turbine size, we are not seeing same kind of rapid change happening on the infrastructure. This is something government has to really look into. Of course, the roads have really improved a lot. I mean, the highways and freeways have really improved a lot, but the major problem is the last mile is becoming a big problem, with the kind of size of the blades going up. One more point which is very critical, for the government to look into is the local content. This is something, really bothering. This is something government has to really look into, the local content part, because, there are many fly-by-wire operators, and that is really creating a big challenge for at least people like us. Okay, this is something. I mean, I think Madhava talked about the PLI. PLI also is something. I mean, PLI is available for solar, but then it's not available for wind. This is also critical. The government has to think how the solar is important, wind is also equally important. Okay, so I think these are the 3 major points, but the most critical is the local content, which is very critical.
Thank you for your thoughts. I can see Pandu itching to speak on this sudden transition from 2 to 3 to 4 to 5.
Quick reaction.
Please go ahead on
Electricity generated either through solar or wind, it gives the same amount of shock when somebody touches the live wire. Why would it be differentiated?
Okay. On a subject matter expert note, what is your thought on this journey from 2 to 3 to 4 to 5, it not getting stabilized? What challenges do you face as a supplier in this journey? I'm asking you, Pandu.
Okay.
your thoughts.
Okay. The why the megawatts are increasing, right? It's basically the land availability and the high wind capabilities on the land is also decreasing. We don't have so many. So given the land size, how do we optimize? That's the race in which it's going. So is it good? Yeah, it is good. But to how far and how long we can go, that is the challenge, right? And just to take an example on the offshore, we have 15 gigawatt, someone is coming at 18 gigawatt, and someone is racing towards 20 gigawatt. I would say in an offshore, if you start doing that, then it's a clear trap where we will reach to the extremes of the logistics. And we need to stop there and reevaluate how do we collectively ensure or collectively act together to move the components of that massive scale. And that's too high to do
Thank
that.
you. Corinne, your thoughts on what's happening in Europe and North America on this subject. Let's confine to onshore. Offshore is a lottery game right now, but let's talk about
Sure.
onshore.
I would say from an onshore perspective, speaking from a position of where we may at one point in time have led some of that fast move to being the biggest nameplate, thinking we were getting out in front. I would say what that got us in our supply chain, it was just too fast of a race. It hurt our supplier partnerships, it hurt quality, it hurt the end user at the end of the day. And so I think I just take a word of caution of what we learned and why we've kind of changed our strategy to focus on, like you said, how do you get 5 gigawatts of a platform out and multiple vendors being able to do that over years. That's how you get safety and quality and low cost. And that's what we see with our India supplier partners, that ability to have that safety, low cost. And the low cost comes from us not giving them a new model every 2 weeks or changing it. So I just think we need to learn a little bit from the past, but also not be so archaic that you never change, right? We need to change, we need to continue. But again, I would just, we're learning from the past, and I think pretty proud of where we are in GE with just hitting 5 gigawatts of manufacturing in India, but at the same time, because of the quality and the low cost coming out of this country, I think this year we've shipped major components for 7 other models across the world. So I think India's in a unique position, and just don't make the same mistakes that have been made elsewhere.
Thank you. Let's move on to a topic that should engage all of us, has been engaging all of us, which is the global opportunity. In terms of India's export competitiveness, so there are 2 factors. There is a China plus 1. So we hear from a lot of developers, people who purchase equipment, etc. from India, just like in the solar chain, that because we are compelled to buy other than China, the cost structure is pretty high and the cost competitiveness is missing. At the same time, when we look at inherent cost structure, the latest Vivek report talks about, and there are enough data points to say 20 to 32% higher cost compared to, let's say, a low-cost country like China. There are issues around it, which all of us know, higher cost of raw materials, aggregation, the kind of support that the government gets, like corporate income tax here is 33.8. In China, it's 25, and you have a 15% concessions to wind power enterprises, which makes it quite a different ballgame. But knowing all this, let me segregate the conversation in 2 parts for OEMs and suppliers. Let me first go to you and talk about, Shan, how do you think India can be more competitive globally?
I think, as I mentioned earlier, there are a lot of SOPs what China gives to its manufacturers, okay, locally. I mean, even there are a lot of incentives they give for exports, which really is lacking in India. I think we get some 2% incentive or something, if I remember right. This is something lacking in India, So this is, really the government has to look into this if we are looking for a lot of exports out of India, so that, this will I mean, this will really give a big advantage as an exporter.
Corinne, in your role in GE Vernova, as somebody who's developing suppliers across the globe, what are your thoughts on how you are working with Indian manufacturers to become more cost competitive?
I think I'd start with that basic concept of the safety, quality, and delivery, on-time delivery. It's super important for us, and I think we are focusing on the partners that can deliver that, but again, the feedback we get is we need stability and volume. That's what our suppliers are really asking us for, that stability and volume. And again, I'll just reiterate, I know it may seem like a challenge in India, but from a global perspective, I think you're doing very well. Definitely one of the #1 places we're exporting to our other major markets. So keep doing what you're doing, I think. But as you mentioned, just push on the government a bit more. And when I learned that solar had PLI, but wind has nothing, that I didn't understand that. So.
Okay, we don't have the government representative, but I'm sure the chimes can go there. And again, Madhav, from Vista's perspective, your thoughts on how the Indian manufacturing scenario can be more competitive? What steps should be taken towards that?
I would say that be a cost sensitive and develop that cost leadership. That is more important. Stay disciplined to that cost. Because if you really want to compete and be an export market, the cost plays a very vital role, and China is too far away to reach them. Because as some of my panelists were saying, the incentives, the heavy incentives and the ecosystem they built around the industry is too high, and which the government of India has to do it, then they have to do it with a lot of PLIs and support and a care system for this industry. That's number one. Number two, to the suppliers, they should also ensure quality. Quality is what some of these component suppliers, they have gone into. They have went to a very bad state. So quality in all we do is very vital. And ensure that you also keep innovating on the process, do your R&D work to ensure you stay competitive, not only in the cost, but also in the productivity. I think this three would say.
Thank you. Bharti, from purely a ground-up perspective as a manufacturer, your thoughts on this?
Yeah. As far as the tower is concerned, we had a deep study in exporting to US, Australia, and also to Brazil, and some part of other countries also. And we have been exporting too, not in a very big volume other than to US. So which means to say, as on today, the cost available here is giving a good competition to the country what you said as China. So ours is cheaper by adding the logistic also, cost also. But then that is not a challenge to us. The challenge is US around 2 years ago they put anti-dumping duty. So that stopped. And then Canada also could not take our tower, mainly because of some local requirement and opposition from the local tower manufacturers. Otherwise, as far as the quality is concerned, our local Indian tower manufacturers have established, and we don't get any complaint from OEM so far. So we are stable.
Okay. If I summarize it, I can clearly see OEMs want more. You feel you're already doing your best. So that's what we call dil mange more, and that's always going to be there. So, yeah, you were wanting to say something?
Yeah. What I would like to say that, China works on volume. Okay. we cannot compete on the volume because they have a huge volume. Where they do 100 gigawatt, we do only 5 gigawatts, 6 gigawatts over here. So I think we as an India should bring out some differentiator over here. Just on the cost of the material, I don't think it's going to work over here. We have to be cost competitive, we need to be quality conscious. But on cost competitive, how can we bring in more technology? I think that's where we need to bring in a differentiator. And we need to invest more onto innovation, we need to invest on more technology, R&D. I think then India can become a differentiator and have an edge with just driving on the volume and the cost. That's what I think.
So I can see the clock ticking, and I would like to get some of the questions from audience after 10 minutes. So let me just try and collapse the last part of it, which is very critical when we talk about supply chain, which is on long-term innovation and collaboration. And that's one of the things that any industry which has evolved, like the automobile, has witnessed that. So when we take an example even today in electronic components, it's almost the drives, etc., everything is imported, in spite of the fact that we are talking now about semiconductor policy, etc. So just a few thoughts, and I'll just go quickly round the panel. How can innovations like modular design or specialized transportation reshape the wind energy supply chain? What role does digitization and real-time data monitoring play in modernizing supply chains? And how can Indian wind energy companies and suppliers collaborate more effectively with international partners to scale innovation and build more resilient supply chains? And what role can joint ventures or technology transfer agreements play in reducing reliance on imports? I know I have kept a large plate, a lot of things on your plate, but if you can just start from you, Pandu, and then progress this side.
I mean, even before taking this question, my thoughts are still around on the cost piece of it. That is where we really need technology. That is where we really,
It's always a challenge whenever you ask something on long term. Short term issues do crop up.
Make me fit, then I can become competitive. Yeah. That's the appeal I would like to place.
But let me go to Bharti and put those.
Taking further from him, what the 2% incentive and all gone. We don't get any incentive. So I strongly advocate, it is easy to make India as a global supplier for tower, provided the government support in some form of incentive is given to this sector. We have been proving that, so we can easily become as a global supplier for tower.
Madhav, your thoughts on the long-term innovation and the collaboration opportunities?
Yeah, that's a very good question which you asked, right? That should be an innovation, and government should also incentivize this innovation and the R&D. And the industries should also fund that, because that's how the competitiveness comes, I truly believe. And digitalization is the talk of the town now. And digitalization is not something related to your technology. It is related to the way you do the business within your organization. Let it be sales, let it be supply chain planning, because this is a very vast logistic corridor. So if you digitalize this logistic corridor, you tend to gain really a good value created in your organization. Thank you.
Okay, from my side, see, today we are driving the localization. I am sure that all of us are really working on the localization. But meantime, we also need to work on a public-private partnership on the technology improvement. Now, okay, when we talk about public, might be a government organizations will not be ready to come up, but at least as a larger private organizations, I think today a lot of MSMEs and SMEs are lack that technology or technology support. I think that is where, as a larger organization, we all should be open to see how we can develop these technologies and develop the small SMEs up so they will be capable to stand themselves and come out a better product.
Thank you. Yes.
Yeah, I'll shorten this by agreeing with Dinesh. I do see successes elsewhere where some of that incentive fund goes to public-private partnership. I think the importance is finding out what are the 1, 2, or 3 biggest challenges you have, like if it's transportation, if it's automated manufacturing. Focus on a few things really well together, and many of, if not all of us, have R&D centers here in India, and become not only that low-cost country, but a high-quality, low-cost, high intellect, high IP type supplier.
Thank you.
Yeah, you just mentioned about the innovation and the JVs and things like that. There are a lot of companies which are ready to have some kind of an innovation partnership with us, especially on the drives, on the converters and many other things. But then at the end of the day, everything boggles down to the volumes, okay? Because they look into huge volumes. We are only at 3 gig right now, and 3 gig also not very consistent. So this is something, so I mean, this again, government has to look into that, because there are a lot of European governments which fund innovation projects, and in turn will fund these kind of JVs so that, the localization can become faster. This is something government should really look into, whether these kind of funds would be available for innovation projects.
Yes, Bhaskar.
Corinne touched about safety, quality, and cost, but I would like to add one more point, sustainability, because now Europe is moving towards CBAM, right?
Wonderful.
Yeah, January 26, it will hit us. So if you want to export to Europe, we need to be CBAM compliant, like we need to be more sustainable. So that will be a point which we should focus on if you want to export. And then the next thing is like we can promote industry academia relationship, because when they are out of the organization, they should be ready to contribute to the industry. That is something where we can develop the skills required. That is also something we can focus on.
Actually, that reminded me of how Norway supports specialized projects through initiatives like the Pilot E project, which promote collaboration between industry and research entities to develop innovative solutions. So I'm sure the audience, the appetite has been whetted, and we can definitely take some questions. We have an eminent panel members, and just mention your name, organization, and to whom are you addressing the question. And I will request you to be concise. Can we have the mic to the gentleman, please? Or would you like to venture up front and state? I can repeat the question. Or maybe let me run up to you and give you the mic. Yeah, okay. We'll do the distribution. Just get some of them across.
Yeah, thank you. My question is to myself, Prabhu. I'm an entrepreneur. I have experience in Europe. I have done 3 different projects in Belgium, Germany, and Sweden. So I'm very much glad to hear all this about innovation and the industry academia, etc. My question is to Mr. Dinesh Lakshman. So you have mentioned that public-private partnerships and also innovation funds. So I see that when it comes to sustainability and wind energy fostering, there is a lot of system gap. Especially, I would like to know from you, how well is wind industry known in other ministries, and how well do you think schemes like PM Surya Ghar or things like this can be done for wind industry so that research is being supported?
I think I am not the right person to answer. Knows about this.
Yeah, thank you for that question, right? So you're talking about the innovation, and that's what as an industry, as the panelists, when we had a discussion off the stage, we have been emphasizing that there should be an innovation fund, right? That's where from the government and from the private, each of the OEMs, each of the component suppliers has to invest in this innovation, because that is what is going to take you to the next step of the competitiveness, the efficiency, and the excellence in whatever way you perform your operations or that can create the value. So this is what is very much needed on the public-private partnership to go ahead. And we are also asking the government to give these incentives to the wind industries to promote and take it to the next level, right? If you want to be a competitive and supply to the world.
Thank you. Prabhu, we'll have to let anybody else who has a question, please. Thank you. Okay. I don't think the audience... No? Okay, thank you. So, on behalf of the entire audience and the organizers, I would like to thank the panelists for their thoughts and for sharing what they think could enable India to get out of what I say, not just the current level of competitiveness, but to become the numero uno supplier to the world. I think looking beyond the domestic industry, there is an opportunity, as we call it. The global reset allows us to do that. In every adversity, there is an opportunity. And thank you for your thoughts on that. I'm sure, as we discussed beforehand, that there is a need to have few working groups to make comprehensive views on what are the exact steps that we require from the government. And your contribution towards that end will be very useful. Thank you so much for your time and effort. Thank you. And I would like to thank the audience on behalf of the entire panel. Thank you.
Thanking Mr. Pandu Chilakuru. Thank you, sir. Thanking Mr. K. Bharati. Thanking Mr. Pukala. Thank you to Mr. Dinesh Lakshmanan. Thank you, ma'am. Thanking Ms. Holloway. Thanking Mr. Vithal. Mr. Radhakrishnan. Thank you, Mr. Srivastava.